Tonight, a man in a worn-out hoodie is about to walk into the one place where he should never be questioned. What happens in the next few... She sees a hoodie. She sees tired eyes. What she does not see is the truth standing right in front of her. One word, one decision. It seems so small in the moment. Somewhere in this room, a camera is already recording the biggest mistake of her career. He does not raise his voice. He does not argue. Because a man who built something from nothing already knows exactly how this story is going to end. By morning, everyone in that building will know exactly who they turned away, and for one hostess, there will be no undoing what the cameras saw.
If you have ever been judged before anyone bothered to know your name, this story is for you. And if it moves you even a little, hit like and subscribe before we begin, because what happens next will stay with you long after the video ends. Daniel Hart had learned a long time ago that the way people looked at him usually had nothing to do with who he actually was. He had learned it the hard way, in hospital waiting rooms, in bank lobbies, and now apparently in the lobby of his own restaurant. 3 years earlier, Daniel had been a line cook working double shifts to keep his small family afloat, while his wife Claire fought an illness that no amount of hope could outrun. When she passed, Daniel was left with a 5-year-old daughter, a mountain of grief, and a decision to make about what kind of life he wanted to build out of the wreckage. He chose to build something that mattered. He poured every dollar of Claire's life insurance and every hour he could scrape together into opening a restaurant that carried her favorite recipes, her favorite colors on the walls, and her name stitched quietly into the lining of the staff aprons where only he knew to look. He called it Hart Co, and in 2 years it had grown from a modest 20-table dining room into one of the most talked-about restaurants in the city. But success had brought a strange kind of loneliness. Daniel could no longer walk through his own dining room without someone recognizing him, without the staff straightening their posture and putting on a performance instead of simply doing their jobs. He wanted honest feedback. He wanted to know what a regular family experienced on an ordinary Tuesday night, not what a boss saw when everyone knew he was watching. So once a month, Daniel did something none of his newer employees knew about. He left the office early, changed out of his usual tailored shirts, put on an old gray hoodie and a pair of jeans that had seen better days, and took his daughter Mia to dinner at his own restaurant as if they were just another family walking in off the street. It was the only way he could see the truth. It was also, on one particular rainy Thursday evening, about to teach him something he never expected to learn. The rain had started around 6 that evening, and by the time Daniel and Mia reached the restaurant, it was coming down in heavy sheets, the kind that soaks through canvas shoes and turns city sidewalks into rivers of reflected neon. Daniel held Mia's small hand as they crossed the street, her yellow raincoat glowing under the streetlights, her bear-shaped backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Mia loved these nights. To her, they were an adventure, a secret only she and her father shared. She did not know that the restaurant belonged to them. She only knew that her father always ordered the same appetizer, always let her pick dessert first, and always seemed a little quieter than usual on these particular evenings, though she was too young to understand why. When they pushed through the heavy glass doors, warmth and the smell of garlic and roasted rosemary greeted them immediately, along with the low hum of conversation and the clink of wine glasses. Daniel scanned the room out of habit, checking the flow of servers, the cleanliness of the tables, the energy of the staff. Everything looked good. He allowed himself a small breath of pride before turning his attention to the hostess podium, where a young woman he did not recognize stood scrolling through a tablet. Her name tag read Vanessa. She had been hired only 3 weeks earlier during a wave of new staff brought on to handle the restaurant's growing popularity, and Daniel had not yet had the chance to meet her personally, something that would matter a great deal in the minutes that followed. Vanessa looked up as Daniel and Mia approached, and something in her expression shifted almost instantly. Her eyes moved from Daniel's damp hoodie to his worn sneakers, then down to Mia's soaked raincoat, and her posture stiffened in a way that Daniel recognized immediately, though he said nothing yet. He gave her the benefit of the doubt. Everyone had bad nights. He simply smiled and asked for a table for 2. Vanessa glanced past him toward the dining room, where well-dressed guests were finishing plates of seared salmon and reading dessert menus by candlelight, and then looked back at Daniel with an expression that was polite on the surface but unmistakably cold underneath. She informed him, in a voice pitched just loud enough for the nearby staff to hear, that the restaurant was fully booked for the evening and unable to accommodate walk-ins. Daniel glanced toward the dining room. He could see at least 4 empty tables from where he stood, one of them clearly visible just past the wine display. He mentioned this gently, without accusation, simply pointing out that there seemed to be availability. Vanessa's smile tightened. She explained a little too quickly that those tables were reserved for guests arriving later, and that Hart Co. maintained a certain standard for its dining room experience, glancing again deliberately this time at his hoodie and sneakers. 2 other staff members near the coat check exchanged a look and a barely suppressed smirk, one of them whispering something to the other that made them both glance toward Daniel and Mia again. Mia, sensing the tension though not understanding it, tugged gently on her father's sleeve and asked in a small voice if they could go somewhere else, if she was hungry, if maybe they should just go home. It was that question, more than anything Vanessa had said, that settled something firmly in Daniel's chest. He knelt down, ignoring the eyes of the staff around him, and told his daughter softly that everything was fine, that they would find somewhere wonderful to eat, and that some places simply were not ready to have them tonight. He stood, thanked Vanessa with genuine, quiet politeness that unsettled her more than anger would have, and turned to walk back out into the rain with his daughter's hand in his. He did not say who he was. He did not demand to see a manager. He did not raise his voice or make a scene, because Daniel Hart had built his entire life around the belief that dignity was not something you had to prove to people who had already decided not to see it. Instead, he walked Mia 2 blocks down to a small noodle shop that stayed open late, ordered her favorite dumplings, and let her tell him about her day at school while the rain tapped steadily against the window. He did not mention Vanessa again that night. He did not need to. He already knew exactly what he was going to do the next morning, not out of revenge, but out of responsibility to the values he had built his restaurant around in the first place. The following morning, Daniel arrived at Hart Co. before the sun had fully risen, letting himself into the back office where the overnight security footage was archived automatically. He was not looking for evidence to punish anyone. He was looking for the truth, because a man who had spent years fighting to be seen for who he truly was could not, in good conscience, run a business that made other people feel invisible for the way they looked. He found the footage from the previous evening and watched it in full, his jaw tightening slightly as he saw, frame by frame, exactly what had happened at the podium the night before. He watched Vanessa's posture change the instant she looked at his clothing. He watched her gesture toward the well-dressed guests behind him. He watched Mia tug gently at his sleeve, asking to leave, and he watched himself, calm and composed, walk his daughter back out into the rain. By 8 that morning, the restaurant manager, a steady, thoughtful man named Robert, who had worked alongside Daniel since the very first month Hart Co. opened its doors, arrived to find Daniel already seated in the office. The footage paused on the screen. Robert did not need an explanation once he saw Daniel's expression. He simply sat down and asked what Daniel wanted to do. Daniel's answer surprised him. He did not want Vanessa fired on the spot. He wanted her to understand fully and honestly the weight of what had happened, and he wanted every member of his staff, new and experienced alike, to understand it alongside her, because the problem was never really about one hostess on one rainy Thursday. It was about a culture that had quietly allowed appearance to dictate worth. And Daniel refused to let that culture take root in a restaurant built in his late wife's memory. That afternoon, before the doors opened for the evening shift, Daniel called a full staff meeting, something that had never happened outside of the restaurant's opening week. The dining room, usually filled with the clatter of preparation, fell completely silent as every server, host, bartender, and kitchen staff member gathered around the long communal table near the kitchen. Vanessa stood near the back, unaware of what was coming, still believing this was simply a routine meeting about scheduling or new menu items. Daniel walked to the front of the room, dressed now in the same tailored shirt his staff recognized, and without any dramatics, played the footage from the night before on the small screen mounted near the bar. The room grew quiet in a different way as the staff watched the interaction unfold, several of them slowly recognizing the man in the hoodie on screen as the very same man now standing calmly in front of them. Vanessa's face drained of color as understanding hit her in full, the realization crashing over her that the man she had turned away, the man she had judged and dismissed within seconds of seeing him, owned the restaurant she worked in, the restaurant she had been so eager to protect from someone who didn't fit. She opened her mouth to apologize immediately, her voice shaking, but Daniel raised a gentle hand, not to silence her but to finish what he needed to say to everyone in the room. He told them, calmly and without anger, about Claire, about the restaurant's name stitched quietly into every apron, about the nights he still came in dressed exactly as he had the night before, not to test his staff out of suspicion, but because he needed to know, truly know, that the values he had built this place around were still alive when he was not standing there in a suit, reminding everyone to uphold them. He told them that a restaurant could have the finest food in the city and still fail completely if it forgot that every single person who walked through its doors deserved to be seen as a full human being before anything else, regardless of what they were wearing or how tired they looked after a long, difficult week. Vanessa, tears now visible, apologized directly to Daniel in front of everyone, admitting that she had made a snap judgment she was deeply ashamed of, and asking what she could do to make it right. Daniel's response was not punishment. It was an invitation. He asked her to stay, not despite what had happened, but because of it, believing that someone who had truly felt the weight of that mistake was often far better equipped to prevent it from happening again than someone who had never been tested at all. He asked her to help him build a new training program, one centered not on service scripts and wine pairings, but on empathy, on recognizing the quiet dignity of every guest who walked through the door, whether they arrived in a designer coat or a rain-soaked hoodie. Over the following months, Hart Co became known not just for its food, but for something rarer in the industry. A genuine warmth extended equally to every guest who entered. Vanessa became one of the most respected hosts on staff, often the one training newcomers on the very lessons she had learned the hardest way possible. Daniel continued his quiet monthly visits with Mia, though word eventually spread among the staff about what those visits truly meant, and every single time, without exception, father and daughter were welcomed with the same warmth given to anyone else who walked through those doors, rain-soaked hoodie or not. Mia grew up believing, simply and completely, that kindness was not a performance reserved for certain kinds of people, because she had watched her father live that truth in the quietest, most unassuming way possible, never needing to raise his voice to prove a point that his actions had already made clear. And somewhere in the fabric of every apron worn in that restaurant, stitched in small, careful letters only the staff who truly understood the story ever noticed, Claire's name remained, a quiet reminder that the truest measure of any place, any business, any person was never in how it treated the people it wanted to impress, but in how it treated the people it assumed no one was watching.